Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session, Patronage for Heritage. It is amazing to see so many of you today, and I hope you are all well. My name is Gemma. I am from the XpoNorth Digital team. XpoNorth Digital is Highlands and Islands Enterprises mechanism for specialist digital support for the creative and heritage economies across the Highlands and Islands region, and the project is delivered by Ironworks Venue. This workshop is part of HIE's Northern Innovation Hub, designed to build on and accelerate business innovation. It is funded through the Inverness and Highland City Region Deal, a joint initiative supported by £315 million of investment from the UK and Scottish governments, Highland Council, HIE and UHI. I'm now going to pass over to our amazing heritage specialist, Nicola Henderson.
Thank you, Gemma. Welcome, everybody. Falcha Uvula. Great to see you all here today. I'm Nicola Henderson. As Gemma said, I'm the Heritage Specialist working with XpoNorth Digital, and today I am joined by Tim Wright, who is the Crowd Economy and Digital Specialist. Want to say hi?
Hello, everybody.
So we're going to be sharing this workshop today, talking through patronage for heritage. We're going to outline some of the opportunities and challenges, but I'm just going to share my screen actually before I end up talking away and forgetting to do that.
Yes, and we're going to do this in a fairly relaxed way. It's going to be quite conversational. We're going to leave time for questions. So if you've got questions, you can either chuck them in the chat bar or save them up for the end. But we're open to interruptions if there's something burning that you absolutely need an answer to at that particular point. But it's going to be quite conversation, more sort of Morecambe and Wise, Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy, dog and pony, however you want to describe it. But Nicola will take the lead, and I'll as usual lazily throw things in as I see fit, unless of course Nicola passes me the ball to say speak about this for a while, Tim. So, and Nicola, I can see your screen perfectly.
Fabulous. And that's exactly what I'll do. I'll pass the ball to you sometimes, but yeah, as Tim says, it's very relaxed. We do have lots of time for questions at the end, but if there is anything burning throughout the session that you want to ask right there and then, just pop your hand up or pop it in the chat, and Gemma or Tim can let me know if I can't see it just now while I share my screen. So yeah, today we'll look at some of the opportunities and challenges for patronage for heritage organisations, and hopefully give you some skills and confidence to dip your toe into the digital membership pond. Digital membership isn't always a magic bullet that's going to solve your income generation challenges, but income generation through digital tools takes a lot of work and it might not be right for you. But if you're able to dedicate some time and resources to it, then it can start to build and be a strong part of a diversive income model. So what do we mean by digital membership? I found this kind of definition online using a web-based service that enables you to take recurring payments easily from your fans. This could be a monthly payment or a pay-per-post membership with tiers of rewards, depending on the amount pledged each month. The museum then develops content for their pages, which is available only to their patrons. And as we work through these slides, we can unpick what that means in practice in terms of tiers of rewards, what kind of content, finding fans, etc. But Tim, do you want to add anything here in terms of?
Yeah, I guess I think the interesting thing to note about it is it has a lot in common with crowdfunding, in as much as it's in large part transacted online. It's grown popular recently, but it's a very well-established concept in many respects. But the crucial difference between crowdfunding and patronage is typically with a crowdfunding project, you're thinking about funding a particular project and there is a beginning, middle and end to that engagement. Whereas with these types of digital membership and patronage models, you're looking about retaining people as paying customers and paying supporters over an extended period of time. So there are many things in common, but there are also some quite important distinctions as well.
Great, thank you. So I thought we could start with the platforms or web-based service, as the previous slide referred to. There's lots of different platforms available, as I was having a look through. Some help you with more regular funding solutions and some that are more focused on kind of one-off donations. So again, I'm just going to pass back to Tim to talk through some of those platforms and help explain them. I think the first slide is mostly looking at those kind of regular solutions, and in the second slide's got more of the one-off ones.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of important distinctions between these types of platforms. So in the case of a platform like Patreon, all of the projects, all of the patronage projects reside on that particular platform. So they sit on Patreon. And whilst you can embed content from that into your own digital presence, all of your patrons will be directed to the Patreon platform in order to perform transactions and interact with you in a more deep and meaningful way. The other model is where you can integrate it somehow into your own existing digital offering. So this is where, for example, you might put this functionality directly into your own website. And the classic example of that would be something like MemberMouse, which is specifically designed for WordPress, the WordPress content management system, which many of you will be familiar with. And I see somebody's got some problem with sound there. Irvin, I think probably the best idea would be to log out and log back in, because I think you're probably the only person that's having that problem at the moment. So maybe if somebody could get back to Irvin on that, if Gemma, maybe you could respond to Irvin on that if you can't hear me saying that. So in terms of those two major distinctions then, so we have the idea where you have a platform that manages all of this for you. And then the other model is where you try and integrate it into your own existing digital offering. The other distinction, I think, is that there are some providers. So if we think about people like Buy Me a Coffee and TipJar and these types of things, these allow somebody to pay you on a one-off basis or as a membership model. And there is a distinction. Some of them offer both of those models and some of them don't. So some of them you have to sign up to be a patron or a member before you can make a contribution. Others will allow you to simply make a contribution without having any kind of formal relationship. So the two obvious ones that would be examples of that are the two of the ones that are listed here, Ko-fi and Buy Me a Coffee. So the distinction with Buy Me a Coffee and Ko-fi is that on Buy Me a Coffee, anybody can buy you a coffee, and you can also be a member and have that more sophisticated ongoing relationship. On Ko-fi, you have to have signed up as a member or a patron in order to make a contribution. So these are some of the key functional differences that you'd probably want to think about when you are choosing one of the platforms to use with your own digital offering. Do you want a patronage site where you've got people going to a hosted service? Do you want to embed it directly into your existing digital offer? And do you want people to make one-off payments if that's acceptable to you, or do you absolutely want them to sign up as members? So these are key distinctions to think about. And then, of course, the other thing to think about is they all have slightly different funding models or pricing models. Generally speaking, you're looking at something like a 5% of all of the donations that you receive or the contributions that you receive go to one of the platforms. And there'll usually be transaction costs as well, but there's a good deal of variety within those platforms. So these are some of the things that you'll want to balance up and consider when you're selecting a platform. There'll also be things around linguistic choices, payment platforms. So if you are wedded to a particular payment provider, then you need to ensure, obviously, that the choice that you make is appropriate for that particular technical offering. So there are a number of things that you need to balance up, but there is a good deal of variety, and so you'll usually be able to find some type of offering which suits your particular circumstance. Is that okay, Nicola, as a kind of high-level overview?
What I can also do is signpost afterwards is we have a really good blog on the XpoNorth website as well that goes into a bit of detail about platforms. So if you're looking to choose, it can help talk you through and help you make an informed decision around selecting your platform. So yeah, we know a bit about the platforms and we know a bit about what digital membership is, but why would we want to do it? Well, most heritage organisations already have some kind of membership scheme, and whether it's your friends of or something else, and managing it using a digital platform can make the process a lot smoother and reduce work from reminders and invoices, etc., etc. So just as a way to manage your current membership, it can be a really good way to embrace that. The additional benefits of the tiered approach is that you can deepen the relationship with your fan or member and find those with a passion for your organisation and offer them more content that is tailored to their interest and then grow their connection to you. That's make them more likely to pay more and to donate more often because you have a more consistent and deeper relationship with them. So that would hopefully lead to you being able to grow your income a bit more as well.
And I think it's worth making the point that the growing your income piece speaks to when and why patronage suddenly became popular again. A lot of this emerged during the COVID period, particularly around creative businesses, where they were perhaps prevented from earning their income in the traditional manner. So particularly performing artists and those types of individual and organization were curtailed in their normal way of earning a living. So they were exploring alternative ways of reaching an audience and monetizing what they do. And patronage models grew very, very popular during that particular period. So that was one of the reasons that this has become a more significant phenomena than perhaps it was before. The other thing about the cultivating a deeper relationship and engaging with your membership is that by utilizing these platforms, you can potentially reach other groups and expand your membership into other groups that perhaps otherwise wouldn't engage. And I know, Nicola, we're going to talk about this a little bit when we talk about Bovington, aren't we? And the Tank Museum's experience of introducing a patronage model. They see this as a mechanism of engaging with geographically dispersed interested parties who have an interest in what the museum provides, but may never, by virtue of the fact that they are on the other side of the world, take the trouble to actually go and visit it. But they can engage with them and monetize that engagement, despite the fact that they are geographically dislocated from them. And the other aspect, and again, we'll touch on this a little bit more, is that they have managed to explore alternative groups with an interest in the topic of that particular museum. So in the case of the Tank Museum, they've managed to build a community who are interested in tanks from a gaming perspective, from a virtual perspective, rather than from a physical one. But we'll touch on that a little bit more when we talk about the Bovington Tank Museum.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and some people in this room have probably heard me say it before, it's the Tank Museum's general marketing is about coming along to have a great kind of family experience and coming in and enjoying it. And it's why I myself went along. It was to dodge some showers that were happening. It was to have a lot of fun. There was lots of dressing up for kids. There was some Lego, and there's some good kind of general looking at sort of war history. But specifically, tanks are not really my kind of thing. And they don't market it specifically for people who just love tanks. But as we'll go on to look at in the example that we'll come to in just a couple of slides, they can focus on the people that do love tanks. That's a global audience around the world. So there are, of course, challenges to doing this. It does take a lot of work. You need to be able to deliver on what you offer. So the lowest tier could be very simple, and it's thinking about what you maybe already do for your members. It might be something simple like a monthly newsletter, priority booking for events, etc., discount in the shop maybe. But as you ask for more money, you need to deliver more content, and content does take time to make. And once you've decided on the kind of content you can create and how often, just putting that on the platform's not enough. You need to be able to let people know about it. You need to build it into your social media and general marketing strategy, ensuring that you're sharing it regularly. Therefore, there's more capacity needed. So it's thinking about that content, knowing what you have within your own skills to make or within the organization, knowing that when you commit to saying you're doing it, that you can deliver it, and that you've got the time to kind of add that into your social media strategy and keep putting on everything. You see it from podcasts I listen to, they'll always say, and don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon, or this is on our Patreon. It's at the start of every video, it's at the end of every video. So you need to be letting everybody know that they can do this and it's out there and adding it into everything.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point, Nicola. This is the big challenge for I think anybody that wants to enter into this particular arena. This necessity to keep producing content that is of value. And we mentioned that the payment trigger for patronage can be a calendar-driven one, so people can sign up for a monthly subscription typically, or it can be triggered by an event, which is perhaps the publication of a particular piece of content coming out, perhaps a video. But in either case, there is an imperative on you to keep supplying the content that is of value to your patrons. And there's multiple aspects to this, I guess, but if you find, for example, managing a social media channel challenging, then one approach that you can adopt in order to address that is to produce a calendar of publishing, so a publishing calendar, which can help structure the way that you can do this, and also help teams address the demand, so that you can collectively do it based on the fact that you have a schedule of topics that you're going to produce over a period of time. But this is something that you can produce in a patronage context as well. But I think the other interesting aspect is the idea of understanding what is actually of value. We recorded a very interesting podcast with Eric Turnerson, who is the chief executive, or was the chief executive and founder of MemberMouse, which is one of the big membership plugins for the WordPress product. And Eric was reflecting on the fact that many creatives in particular find it difficult to understand what it is that their audiences necessarily will pay for. They sometimes believe that it is only the finished product, a recorded piece of content that has been scheduled for release over a period of time, and they've sweated and labored over to polish to the nth degree before they release it. But in fact, in a lot of cases, people are interested in lots of other what may appear mundane aspects to the creative, some of their practice sessions, how they think about writing material. And so you can apply these concepts to your own context about what might be of interest. Q&A sessions, in-depth looks at content. They're in fact engagement programs that allow people to participate in the process of interpretation. There's lots and lots of different ways that you can explore what might be of value. And part of the trick of doing this type of activity well is finding ways of introducing these different ideas of content type and monitoring that which works well and that which attracts the most amount of interest and retains people for the longest period of time. And I suppose that takes me to the point that part of the value of these types of engagement models is it extends the principle of the cost of customer acquisition is higher than the cost of customer retention. So if this is a way of either bringing in entirely new visitors and new patrons interested for the first time in the content and interest that you can create around your heritage center, but also it's a way of retaining those that have had a passing interest. So if people visit the museums or heritage center, how can you retain them in a more deeper and more commercially viable way for yourselves? And this is one of the models that can speak to that.
Thank you. I think that's a really good point about sort of retaining that relationship and maintaining it into the future and making it a more two-way engagement. But it takes us nicely on to the Tank Museum, which I know that you are happy to speak about in a bit more detail.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting case. if you're not familiar with the National Tank Collection in Bovingdon, it's been there for an awful long time. I went there when I was in short trousers, so it must have been there for a long, long time. It is a collection of military vehicles, and it was challenged significantly during the COVID period when obviously visitor numbers dropped substantially. And so they began exploring the idea of patronage as a mechanism to not necessarily replace all of the revenue streams that came in from their visitor numbers, but to at least offset some of the financial challenges that they were experiencing. And what they found was they were able, by luck or plan, to monetize this quite effectively. And so it is a scheme that they have retained and extended significantly over the period. Now, we had the good fortune at XpoNorth to speak to their marketing director and recorded a podcast of that interview. And all of the podcasts that we've referred to thus far, so the interview with Eric Turnison of Member Mouse and the interview with the marketing director at the Tank Museum, are available from the XpoNorth website. And I would recommend you go and have a listen to those, because they are full of insight and information beyond what we're going to tell you today. But as you can see from this screen grab here, what you're being presented with is the typical engagement with your patrons, offering them a series of different tiers that a patron can sign up to. And you can see in this case we're exposed to 3. I think there's more than 3, but here's 3 to choose from. And you can see it ranges from £4.50 per month through to £22.50. And in keeping with the militaristic theme of the museum, they have introduced these ranking type models or monikers for each of those tiers. And again, you can see that they have standard types of tempters in the terms of free trial usage, so that people can get a sense of what they're likely to get in return for their patronage before committing on a longer term basis. But you can also see that the distinctions between the different tiers are quite marked in terms of what you get for each one. And what you will tend to find, I think, is that there is a fair bit of churn with your membership. So you will have people come and go, but you'll be able to establish a reasonable midpoint in terms of both retained numbers, but also the appropriate pricing point for that. And my advice to anybody who was thinking about this is to have a look at what other similar organizations are doing, what they can achieve in terms of, or what they offer in terms of content and interaction, but also the price points for that. And again, the membership level. So here we have, so the Tank Museum has 4 membership levels. You can have more than 4 or less than 4. But it's these are things that you should consider, and I would advise that you have a look at what other organizations are doing in order to get a sense of what works and what doesn't on the face of others' experience. Because whilst we all think that our offering is going to be unique and irresistible, in my experience, most of these things tend to have a certain commonality. There's a bell curve in here in terms of the distribution of what people's experience is like, and most likely yours will be in the mid-range of that. So it's worth not trying to swim markedly against the tide, it seems to me. You'll also note that in many of the platforms, so in particular Patreon, you're often given a sense of the number of subscribers, and you can do a reasonable calculation as to what that is raising for that individual organization on a monthly or annual basis, which again can help you get a sense of what investment you can reasonably put into this type of project and what you might see by way of return. So it's not just purely guesswork. You're basing this on some reasonable observations of what's typical within the marketplace. And here we have a suggestion that this raises about £7,000 per month for the Tank Museum. I think when we spoke to the marketing manager, it was raising more than that. And I think in these days it raises more still, because I think they have even more members. Nicola, do you want me to talk about how they go about retaining and building their membership at this point, or should we?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, just do it now. We're kind of going with the flow. It's fine.
Okay. Well, I think that again you'll hear more about this in the podcast, but they have had some interesting approaches to building membership and extending their reach, and some of their techniques speak to what I would call general good practice in crowd engagement, because this is a type of crowd economy model, in that it's what we would refer to as a long tail model. So we're looking at small transactions from a large number of people, which can then translate into a reasonable flow of funds. But there's also lots of other value that you can generate from having crowd engagement in lots of different ways. No, we're not going to talk about it today, but whether that's crowdsourcing and innovation ideas and communication options for you in terms of making the reach of your message go further. So there's lots and lots of things that you can gain from having highly engaged members. But what the Tank Museum did was to look at slightly allied themes to their core offering, to offer them groups of people who were digitally engaged, who might want to engage them on a kind of thematic or topical approach to what their heritage site was about. And I've mentioned one was the gaming community. So the gaming community, albeit in a virtual environment, is very interested in many cases in military history and military ideas. And so they have actively engaged with that by running Tank Fest and engaging with Tank Fest, which, if you're not familiar with Tank Fest, it is a tank-oriented or military vehicle-oriented gaming forum and event. And so by engaging with those groups and, if you will, piggybacking on them, they have carved away a significant number of those militaristic-minded members into their own offering of real military vehicles. And so they've found that sweet spot between those two distinctive topical interests in militaria. The other thing that they've done, which I think is a very interesting idea, is a version of what I would refer to as influencer marketing. So they have found individuals that have a strong interest in the topic that they deal with, but also have well-established digital presences as well. So in the case of the Tank Museum, they have found a number of people, one of them being, I can never remember his name, but it's the comedian who's known as the pub landlord. And if anybody can remember his name, do. Thank you very much, Chris. Fantastic. Somebody's really on point there. But Al Murray not only is a comedian, but he has a strong interest in military history and has done a number of TV programs on the topic. And so they managed to get Al Murray to come to the museum and get a behind the scenes tour and speak about his own interest in the military vehicles. And by virtue of that, he shares this topic and this material with his own community. And I'm sure many of those then became patrons for the Tank Museum. So that's a classic example of what I would call influencer marketing, by finding people who have their own crowd, their own existing fan base, if you will, who are interested topically in the theme of that particular heritage center, and then using that as a path to find more members. So there's lots and lots of things that you can unpack here, but most of these are all examples, it seems to me, of just good crowd engagement models.
Yeah, that's really good. And we've seen with our Highland Threads project that we did as a collective across Highland Museums how influencer marketing can help us, just because we found some fashion historians that really helped share a lot of that work through Instagram and help that reach kind of snowball, I think, beyond what we'd really expected at the start. So finding those right kind of routes with specific interests and partnerships can make a huge difference. I'll go quickly through the London Transport Museum. I haven't spoken to them, so I don't know as much detail, but basically Hidden London was something that they created to take you into parts of the transport that aren't really used anymore, almost kind of little ghostly places. And so it was kind of created almost specifically for Patreons so that they could do these things called Hidden London Hangouts, where a wee team of them goes and finds these little spots and they do kind of on the spot little conversations there, and you can go and hang out with them and ask questions. So again, they're kind of tying into that slightly geeky market that are really interested in that, or have a really kind of specific focus. So it's looking for that really niche kind of community to speak to. It focuses on that kind of video content and builds on their YouTube series, and has about 5 levels. So there's just the 3 there, starting from, I think that these are like the middle 3. So again, like the Tank Museum, they have a kind of lower level one that's about £4, which is really simple about I think you get a discount in the shop and access to the Hangout still, but that's about all. And then it kind of builds up over time, climbing, I think, to about £83 for absolute really exclusive access and things. And benefits include like content shop discounts and different kind of museum tickets offers. And done on some maybe shaky maths, but it does seem to raise them about 6,000 per month. But that's kind of, as Tim's already alluded to, that seems to change and growing membership. And they only launched this during COVID. I think it was part of their COVID response in 2020, 2021. So yeah, they've just been building it over the last few years and seeing that grow, but that's based on some figures kind of earlier this year. So hopefully reasonably accurate, but shows that if you can put the development in, there is kind of real scope there to grow there.
Yeah, and you can see they use the same principle as the Tank Museum, that their monikers for their tiers were very much related to the transport idea. So you could be a superintendent or a ticket collector or a driver or whatever. Yeah, so you could be the fat controller. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a nice retouch, and I think a lot of them seem to find a wee name that
yeah,
so their own kind of interest. So yeah, I thought it would be quite good for us to share and discuss some of the key things for you to consider before you get started. I'll maybe have a look through these kind of 3 and then pass over to Tim to look through to some of the more in-depth questions on the next one. So like with any kind of new initiative that you're looking to start in your organization, knowing why you want to do it and what you want to achieve before you even get started is really, really important. So are you doing it just about increasing revenue? Are you looking to grow your audiences? Are you looking to diversify those audiences? What would success look like for you? What are you ultimately doing this for? How much time and commitment can you give to it? So being honest about what your current capacity is, how much time do you currently give to nurturing your membership, and how much more could you give? Can you ring fence a few hours a week, or is it more like a few hours a month? Are there any others in the organization that can support you in this area? Could you recruit a remote or digital volunteer building into your crowd who are interested in this topic that could help you create some of that content as well? Essentially, what capacity do you currently have, and have you got any room to kind of grow that capacity? And then thinking about, realistically what you can offer. That feeds into what that capacity is for creating content, but also knowing where your own skills lie. So perhaps you've maybe done a little podcasts and recording before. I was speaking to Morven, who I think's here, who's got some confidence in doing that. So being able to go around your museum and being able to say, I can speak about an object for just 10 minutes, like we used to do in Highland Objects, might be something you can produce quite easily and simply. But then if you were looking to do something more in depth than that takes a lot more editing, then that takes a bit longer. So understanding what your own skills are, what you can realistically offer, and then what might be of interest and value. And so we do have a slide later looking a bit more about content, but again, those kind of Q&A sessions that Tim spoke about earlier, those can be quite simple maybe to do. You might just need to do a monthly kind of check-in chat with our curator on a Friday at 7 o'clock, and it's half an hour, maybe doesn't take as much prep. But actually that's quite high value because people really value that time with the curator that they're getting. It's a really unique experience. So that can be higher value compared. So again, it's just taking that time to understand what you can do, what your own skill set is, and knowing a bit about your audience and what they're kind of interested in.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent series of points. And one of the things to try and remember about this, I think, is that I would describe this as a high touch relationship. So you're trying to deepen your engagement here. So the kind of personal touch is important. And Q&A, by virtue of the fact that it can be live and can be very real time and feel very conversational, is valued because it feels quite exclusive and from the point of view of its availability, but very inclusive because it's a very high touch engagement. So very, very important. And just to touch on that, why do you want to do this? I'll just refer to what I would typically say if we are thinking about crowdfunding. If we say that there is some commonality between this and crowdfunding. Typically, we talk about crowdfunding as having 4 or 5 big areas of return. Finance obviously being one, insight being another. So there's all sorts of insight that you can derive from engaging with the crowd, from understanding what they like, what they dislike, adding value and additional information to objects and through folksonomies and these types of things. You can get tremendous communication value out of this. So this community can become a very, very powerful conduit of advocacy for you, because they will have the collateral to do that and the high engagement with you, so an incentive to do that. It can build networks for you because you can find skill sets and partners through these types of networks, and of course it can just drive growth more generally in lots and lots of different ways. So there are lots and lots of things to be won from this over and above simply just the finance. So speaking to some of these other things, yeah, these are all really important considerations when you're trying to put together an approach to engaging with patronage. So how regular can you be is definitely a question for you about your own capacity for addressing the demands of patrons. Am I looking for regular giving or one-offs? I think is a really important one, because one of the ways you can think about putting a toe in the water for this is if you have existing digital engagement through some of the social media channels, for example, you can try to see whether some of the one-off payment tools that are available to you generate any engagement or interest. So, for example, if you have a YouTube channel, there is the Super Plus function there now that allows people to effectively give you a small contribution in return for your the content that you put through that. Twitter, or X as I think we have to call it these days, has the tip jar function as well. So there are ways of testing whether there is appetite for what you are producing without necessarily getting into a full formal structure of a patronage model. And can I link some of my existing digital tools? Yes, of course. You know, you'll probably have existing content that you can repurpose and reuse for this. And so typically a lot of the YouTube content is and video-based content is typically used within a patronage environment. And yes, you can reuse it because you can refresh and extend some of that content to actually make it available. How much does it cost? We've touched on that. It varies significantly in terms of the different platforms and different models that they adopt. With the member mouse model, you know, you're purchasing a plugin that goes into your site, whereas the Patreon model is more a slice off the top of your transactions. How do you get the money? Again, good consideration, because some are instantaneous payments. So things like buy me a coffee will pay straight into your payment, your preferred payment method immediately, and you'll receive the money immediately, whereas others have a delay to monthly and quarterly payments. So again, these are considerations that you may want to factor into your approach or the technical platform that you choose. Growth of your platform is a really interesting one, because you can move between less sophisticated models to more sophisticated models. So things like a member mouse model is a very sophisticated offering that gives you functional tools to allow you to manage subscriptions and recurring costs, and gives you quite sophisticated analytical tools, whereas things like Ko-fi is much more Member Press, for example, is a much less sophisticated tool. So if you have ambitions to grow significantly and think that this is going to be an important part of your activities, then pitching and finding the right platform to go with from the word go is probably an important one. But moving from a tip jar type approach to a more formal membership model is a much more straightforward approach, so that you're gradually growing it and offering greater levels of sophistication. Support, again, is always important in the choice of technical platform, and you will find that oftentimes different tiers of payment within a particular platform will offer different levels of support. But also you'll find that some of the more popular platforms like Patreon, like Member Mouse, you'll find that there are existing user communities online who can offer support in much the same way that you can receive considerable support for open source software simply through the user community. So there's a range of different things that you might want to factor in about your own personal circumstances as to which of those platforms is the right one for you.
Thank you. I'm going to try and go through the last few slides quite quickly because we're going through this session quite fast, so we've got time for questions. And we have touched on the types of content already, podcast, video, early access, which could mean something simple like perhaps you've got an exhibition opening and maybe you let them have access to the artist a little bit early and to come along just before everybody else does. Behind the scenes stuff, I think with museums is really important. That behind the scenes at the V&A television program was hugely successful. People are really interested in what happens in your stores and how you look after your objects, and it can be quite simple to do. You could just be doing like a little kind of Facebook Live almost sort of event where people come in and see some work, or they're speaking to a volunteer. Tuition can be something that can be quite lucrative at the kind of higher end, thinking about those specific skills you have in your organization that you could share. And Q&As, like we've mentioned before, could be something that is fairly easy for you to produce, but is really high value and value that time with your curator, the chair of your board, guest historians that are coming in, artists that are coming in, giving that kind of exclusive access and offer. And as we mentioned with podcasts before, so they could be something really simple, more like an audio file that's got you talking about an object in the collection that's part of a new exhibition, the story behind it. Or it could be a longer form thing that's about a talking heads. But that would be something that maybe would be costing a lot more money for people to access and less regular, because it takes a lot more time in terms of preparing what you're going to discuss and how you're going to edit it. So again, thinking about where your own skills are and where you're comfortable in the kind of content that you could really cope with producing there.
Yeah, and I think never underestimate the mutual benefits of collaborations. So again, going back to that idea of the Tank Museum, bringing other people in that might want to collaborate with you on this and add value, but also other institutions or other organizations that are in allied fields that mean that collectively you can offer a richer engagement to a wider group of potential patrons. So yeah, I think partnership is definitely something to consider.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Do you want to talk a little bit about how people actually could do it, what the first kind of steps are?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, we've touched on a number of them already, but I think it's, if you are not sure about this, then certainly that toe in the water idea with some of the existing digital channels that you might have to see if there's appetite for that. I mean, quite frankly, you can simply ask people if you have digital engagement through, let's say, Facebook or something similar, then ask your existing followers and subscribers, would they be interested in a membership type model? But I think mapping out the where you want to take this and selecting a platform that best suits those specific needs for a medium term is an important consideration, so that you're not chopping and changing. Because one of the attractions of these more sophisticated tools is there can be an administrative overhead with managing membership, whether it be simple things like, somebody signs up to pay with a credit card and 6 months later the credit card declines the transaction. Chasing up a lot of that stuff can be administratively time consuming and therefore costly. So some of the more sophisticated offerings have better mechanisms of handling some of the administrative things. So if you believe you're going to scale up and are in this for the long term, then those types of considerations can be quite important. But certainly map out ambitions for what you want to achieve over a period of time, so that you have a sense of whether you're making progress towards that, and choosing the appropriate platform to actually support those ambitions, even if that's including things like metrics and monitoring, so that you understand how you're moving towards your goals is quite an important one. Pricing levels, this again, we've alluded to this before. I suggest that you don't, it's certainly in the first instance, step markedly out of what is the norm for your sector. And again, if you're thinking about this from a crowdfunding perspective, there are plenty of examples out there that you can have a look at. And so I would suggest the same thing here. Big platforms like Patreon have a huge number of users, so you will be able to find examples that are not identical to you, but have similar characteristics to what you're trying to do. And so I would suggest that you are guided by that, but not bound to it if you find that you have an opportunity to change it. And yes, promote. These things don't happen by chance. People don't simply discover these things by chance, although that is one of the arguments for being on a platform like Patreon, that there may be some passing interest that may find you, but the emphasis will certainly be on you to make your community aware of the fact that this service is there and to encourage them to sign up.
And the key to success, making the most of the opportunities presented by digital membership schemes, you need to be developing those relationships on other channels and be ready to put in the work to create new content and make these superfan relationships authentic and meaningful. And as we've covered at several points through the conversation, that means pushing it at every opportunity. So I think it's probably good that we maybe stop sharing and we see if there's any questions. I can have a conversation, because we've just got about 10 minutes left just now.
Makes perfect sense, I think. I see Irvin has come back and your sound is working. Is it, Irvin? Second time lucky, is it? You're muted now, so we can't hear you. So there you go. You're getting your own back. So do we have questions? Anybody got any questions they want to ask based on what we've seen? I see Nick Lindsay, you've got your hand up there. So Nick, come on in. You're on mute, mate. So unmute yourself first, please.
The old curse, eh?
I know that feeling, yeah.
Really interesting, Tim. Thank you. Something we hadn't considered, but we have a membership scheme already, but this would monetize it further, I think. What happens if only 6 people join or 5 people join? Is it worth the effort for that sort of number?
Well, that's a consideration for you. I mean, if it's 6 people paying you £100 a month, then it might be worth it. If it's 6 people giving you, £5 a month, probably not. I think realistically, you need to set yourself some targets, and I think you need to give it a fair go. In as much as you need to say, we're going to do this for, let's say, 6 months. And then review after 6 months. But part of that plan has to be, this is the kind of content we're going to do over 6 months. This is how we're going to promote it. And these are the targets that we've set for ourselves. And also do a proper evaluation of the costs incurred. So you could run it over 6 months and realistically have a much stronger sense of the cost of actually maintaining it and producing the content. So then, a review after 6 months might be the point at which it's a go or a no-go. But, this doesn't work for, sorry, Nick, go on.
I was just going to say, is it fair on the half a dozen people that signed up, you decide to abandon it?
Well, if it's done on a monthly basis, then I'm not sure that it's necessarily going to be the end of the world for them. If they're signing up for a year's membership and you quit after 6 months, then I think I might be a little bit peeved. But no, I think you've got to be open about these things as well. I don't think there's any point in trying to pretend that it's going to be something that it's not. So it's quite reasonable to say, this is a new project, we're trying it out, we're going to give it a go, and we'd like to hear what you want to see from a membership model, and then flex to what that audience wants. Then I think you're being fair and open. It's a little bit like crowdfunding. Never try and hide something or tell an untruth, because you will get found out. It's just the way of these things, I'm afraid. But no, I would suggest that you give it a try and give yourself a reasonable time to give it a go, but do it with a plan in mind and some targets in mind and a proper evaluation process at the end.
Thank you.
Got a
We'll give it a go.
question from Katie in the chat, Tim. Would this sit alongside an existing membership scheme? How would we make that distinct for each group of members? Oh, you're on mute now.
There you go. You see, it's catching. I think it's a good question. And how do you make it distinct from your existing membership? I think you make it distinct because, in large part, it's a digital engagement. So it means it might be a different group of people that you're engaging with. Or, if you've got an existing membership, I would be inclined to try and include them right from the word go, even if it's a kind of customary membership that they get, because the people that join are likely to be your best advocates to get other people to join. So if you've got people who are engaged with you already, then certainly pitch it to them as an extension of their existing membership for the start, and encourage them to find other people to join, but also recognize that it's a different type of engagement. You're engaging through a different medium, and that you're doing things that are distinctive, and that you are potentially speaking to a new membership group who otherwise wouldn't be members, if that makes sense. But it's a fine balance that you have to draw between these things, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree. And Katie's just following up, asking if there are any small independent museums who have done this well, and if there would be funding from HIE, which might fund someone to work on this for a museum. On the small independent museums, I was doing some searching around and I couldn't find examples. That doesn't mean they don't exist, because things like the London Transport Museums is called Hidden London. So when you're searching, they might have given them different names. But there are small businesses that do this, or small organizations. One thing is, I sometimes work in the music sector, and some musicians work with Patreon and other platforms to build up doing sort of little lessons and little things, and they're quite individual small organizations in that way, and so it is possible to do, but I couldn't explicitly find kind of other small museum examples. And on HIE, I don't think there's explicitly funding for this, but if this was part of a largest innovation for a new way for you to work within your museum, then it's worth having a conversation around how this would change the model for how you work, because then there's definitely a conversation to have there. If this is quite explicitly an innovation and a new direction for your organization that you have not explored before, then it's worth having that conversation.
And Stuart, you make a good point about balancing it, about your existing content creation. No question of it. It's not the same thing, and there's always a balance to be struck on these things. In terms of returns, you have to generate, as you well know, a significant number of views on YouTube to generate any type of meaningful advertising revenue from it. And I would suggest that this would offer a better return on your investment in terms of what you're going to see back from it. You wouldn't need too many people to sign up. And of course, as we already mentioned, with YouTube, you've got the super thanks button that you can activate there if you've got 500 subscribers. So, you can put a toe in the water about whether people actually do want to pay you for your content rather than just deriving your returns from the advertising.
Great, we've just got a couple of minutes. Any final questions?
Anybody inspired to give it a try? What would be the thing that concerns you most if you're going to consider this? What's the biggest challenge that you would see?
Keeping them supplied and keeping them happy. Well, there's a certain level that we could give them, I guess, but they might expect more. It's obviously not something we've thought about, so we haven't done any detail on it.
I think it might be the time that it would take to actually put this into practice. I know our museum, we're basically run by volunteers. We've got 3 permanent members of staff and 3 temporary members of staff, and there's only actual 1 full-time member of staff, and I think that's going to be our biggest obstacle.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. I can also see this as potentially an interesting project that there may be that could be potentially volunteer run, and that it might be the sort of thing that volunteers might really engage with or enjoy getting involved with. Who knows? But yeah, there's no question that the ability to keep producing content is important. But don't underestimate the what it is that members value. So I know we've already said that musicians find it bemusing that people would pay to watch them rehearse or to talk about their practice technique, but they do. And so never underestimate what's of interest. I see, Liz, you've got your hand up there, so I think you're ahead of Siobhan, so we'll go to you if that's okay.
Okay. You've partly answered 2 of the issues I wanted to bring up, the idea of using volunteers, because I can see how a lot of the types of activity you were talking about would really fit with a volunteer cohort. But the other question I've got is around capacity. And would one way of being able to start something like this off is, rather than start off with several different tiers of membership, start off with just 1 or 2. So you've got a simple membership and a life membership, for example. And if this starts to grow, then grow different levels of membership. Because at the moment, our museum would not have the capacity to do something so sophisticated that we're having to think of membership programs on a regular level at different tiers. We might manage 1 or 2.
I think that makes perfect sense, and the advantage of that is that you can grow it based on feedback from your members. What do they want to see, so that you're tailoring the content that you're producing to meet them. So yeah, that makes very good sense. I saw Siobhan Beatson, you had your hand up at one point, but it's gone down again. So have you withdrawn your question, or is it?
No, it was more so. It's something that we would probably consider, actually, and it kind of accidentally ties in with one of our kind of long-term plans anyway, and it would be a practical way of deploying that, because we were looking at like members areas for websites and all that sort of stuff for access to certain archives and that sort of thing. But I was curious, it was more of a practical question of what's the capacity within the software itself? Do you upload it to the Patreon or whatever, or do they how do you get the content on there? Is there links, or is it like a cloud sort of system that you would put it on?
There's different ways of doing it. So, for example, it's some people will host videos on YouTube. And then, so if we stick with the video example, you can host your videos on YouTube and then gate the access to them via your Patreon page. So there's lots of ways of mashing stuff together. Most of these, and the difference would be between something like Patreon, which is more of a gateway ticket manager, for want of a better expression, that determines access to content that typically sits elsewhere, to the member mouse model, which is designed to integrate specifically into your own website, albeit a WordPress one. But again, as you know, on a WordPress site, you can mash together material that sits and embed it from lots and lots of different sources. It's just that the access route is through your own website, and the member mouse tool allows you to gate who does and doesn't get into that. I mean, WordPress, for example, allows you to create a membership model anyway. So there are lots and lots of different ways of approaching this. It's just the level of sophistication that you want. But typically, you can use content from multiple different sources, but you're just managing the access to it using your patronage or membership software in order to achieve that. I hope that makes sense.
But no, I quite like it, and I think it's something that we would have the experience and to do. It's just trying to get the capacity together for it is where we would struggle. But
yeah,
that might be fundable in some way. But it's good to have it in the back of your head going forward.
Yep, all good.
I'll just
Maybe
finally...
we monetize. Oh,
sorry, no,
Nicola.
go on quickly.
I was just going to say to Liz, maybe we should monetize our board meetings by broadcasting them. That would shake them up a bit, I think.
That's an interesting one.
That's for sadists only.
Die-hard fans only. I was just going to refer quickly to Rebecca's comment in the chat around exclusivity. It is an interesting one. We are always about access to all. But I think one way that I look around these things is like if you were offering a little bit of time with a curator, and that would just be like a paid event, really. Somebody's just paying for that little bit of time. And if by doing that, they're helping keep your museum open so that you can offer access to all, then that's a real benefit to everybody. So it's getting that balance right, that you're still making sure that broadly everybody can access, and finding the right things that you're comfortable with, that you can just monetize for those that have that little bit extra to support you to be open. So I think that's us. Thank you all very much. Some good questions. And thank you very much, Tim, for all your insight and experience on the matter.
No, thanks for pulling it together, Nicola.
And I'll pass over to Gemma to do all the kind of final housekeeping stuff.
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you, Tim, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. There were so many of you today. You certainly kept me on my toes for admitting you all into the room today. I appreciate how busy you all are, so I really hope that you enjoyed today's session and that it met your expectations and it was a valuable use of your time. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you both to Tim and Nicola. I thought it was a great session. It was extremely interesting, and it was so worthwhile with the information that they provided. So this session has been recorded, so if there's anything that you missed, it will be available in a couple of weeks' time on our website, so you can watch it back again to refer to. And with that, please do visit our website, www.exponorth.co.uk, where you can look at our events section and sign up to our newsletter to be kept up to date with future events and news. Also on the website, you'll find our video archive, which you will find today's session, and there's lots of extremely interesting content, as well as our inquiry form for specialist sector advice. So if there's anything that you'd like to chat to us about, fill out the form, and we would love to speak to you and see if there's anything that us at XpoNorth can assist you with. Make sure to connect with us on Facebook, X, also known as Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. And once again, thank you so much for all of you for joining us today. Take care, and we will see you soon.